Hello, I'm Waqar Rizvi, and this is Scope. In the first segment of today's show, we're going to discuss an open letter that's been written by 50 former foreign ministers and officials across the European Union and Europe as a whole, really. This was released in the Guardian newspaper, in part, I believe, as other publications as well, where they spoke about Trump's quote-unquote peace to prosperity Middle East plan. And that is then about the Israel-Palestine conflict, of course. All of these leaders then saying they disagree with it. And that even this proposal as it currently stands has characteristics which may be seen as those which support apartheid. It also then speaks about how the projected Palestinian state would be one without any sovereignty or with little sovereignty, and then that also would be, of course, problematic vis-a-vis any permanent solution to that long-standing issue. Let's discuss that a bit further. We're now joined by Karina, who is an international relations professor and an undergraduate program coordinator at Universidade in Brazil. She's joining us from Sao Paulo, And we're also joined by Toby Greene, who is a Marie Curie Research Fellow in the School of Politics and International Relations at Queen Mary University of London. He's joining us now from London. Toby and Karina, thank you both for your time today. Karina, let me start with you. It's important, isn't it, for so many of ex-officials even to be speaking out on this issue at this time? I mean, this takes a level of courage because speaking about Israel or the issue of how to resolve the issue of Israel-Palestine is one which is not easy. There's a lot of sensitivities involved, aren't there?
Thank you for having me. Yes, it is very important for to hear from these countries their position about the issue regarding Israel and Palestine. But it's not a surprise, especially regarding the historic decisions in the United Nations Security Council. It's not a surprise that the European countries are taking this stand. But it's important to understand their position in contradiction with the U.S. position right now. Trump's government is responsible for this proposal, this peace agreement between Israel and Palestine. And it's important that European countries and Western countries to represent this position right now against U.S. position.
Yeah. Toby, what do you make? Because, you know, the letter, it's not very long, of course, but it does go through some very key issues, such as the sovereignty of any future Palestinian state.
It's understandable that so many senior ex-officials want to express their concerns about this plan, and indeed many of those concerns are extremely valid. Were the plan to be implemented as it's written, it would be very bad for the Palestinians. It would also be very bad for Israel. What I'm not so sure about is the strategy that they're hinting at to try and prevent the worst consequences of this plan being implemented. There's a sort of a hint there that in that letter that the Europeans need to sort of make threats that there will be consequences if Israel seeks to act unilaterally and annexing parts of the West Bank. Now, it is a priority that this plan not be used by the Israeli right to make irreversible steps in the West Bank, including steps towards annexation. But I'm not sure that EU threats or European threats would be that credible or that effective. This plan is designed primarily to help Prime Minister Netanyahu in his fight for political survival. Israel will face its third general election in less than 12 months on Monday, and to help President Trump in his re-election year as well. It's not really there to help the state of Israel. It's there to help those political interests. In that context, I think it might be more effective for EU states and EU leaders to pick up on those elements of the plan which do cohere with international consensus. There are some, and offer to work with the US administration on the basis of those, whilst premising that on the assumption that nothing can be done unilaterally or without bilateral agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. I think for the European states to confront the US and the Trump administration head on will not be that effective and could be counterproductive indeed. And we've seen that in the case of the Iranian nuclear deal, that's not been a very effective strategy. So I think it's a case of try to steer the Trump administration to a more realistic framework rather than try to confront them head on this problematic framework.
Karina, I wonder, do you think that the Trump administration or even the Israelis really can be rerouted in some ways when it comes to this plan?
No, I don't believe it. First, because Netanyahu has a specific plan regarding the territories, the West Bank especially, and his plan is from the last 10 years very specific and very clear. He's going to expand the constructions, the settlement constructions, and planning on, like, it's too big to fail. Yeah. The West Bank constructions are going to be so big at a point that the only option will be annexation. This is his plan. So it's very clear that he's not going to set up, he's not going to negotiate with the Palestinians. The Likud government from the last 10 years has a very clear opinion about the Palestinian Authority. They say that they don't have a place to negotiate. They don't believe the Palestinians because they have relations with Hamas, and the Gaza Strip is separated from the West Bank, government related. So it's very clear that they are not going to negotiate with the Palestinians, and they are not going to set back any position, and the US government is supporting Netanyahu in this case. They are making a clear statement that they're supporting Netanyahu, and we are going to have elections in 2 days in Israel, and Netanyahu is not in a very good place right now, politically speaking. He has a lot of incriminations and a lot of process regarding corruption, and he's not in a very good place. And the Trump's reaction and the U.S. government's reaction to it is very positive to him, especially, but to Likud in general.
Okay, so Toby, let's talk then about the Europeans can possibly do, because I wonder, when you spoke about, how Europe should be reaching out to the Americans and even possibly the Israelis and seeing what parts of this plan can be kept and those that would be allowed really within the international resolutions that currently exist. Do you think that that sort of softer approach would realistically, though, work on the ground? Because as you had mentioned as well in your first answer, this is a right-wing government at this time, and it seems in many ways that Israeli society is moving ever more right-wing, at least when we're looking at the politicians that are elected there and supported by the vast majority. Do you not think that maybe we need a tougher approach at this time?
Strictly speaking, Israel doesn't have a government today and has not had a government for the past year. It has a caretaker government, and that's because Prime Minister Netanyahu has been unable to form a working majority even after 2 successive elections. It looks that after the coming election, he'll be in no better a position. Not only that, but he is about to stand trial on 3 cases of bribery and fraud. So it's not the case that Netanyahu is in a sort of strong, stable position, nor that he represents the majority of Israelis. Israeli society is deeply split on many issues, including on the Palestinian question. If you read the analysis of mainstream security analysts, ex-generals and others analyzing this plan, they think it's extremely problematic for Israel for many reasons. It primarily serves politically, as I mentioned earlier, the interests of Netanyahu and his right-wing base, not the interests of Israel as a whole. So first of all, I think it would make sense for European governments to wait and see what happens. Prime Minister Netanyahu is clinging on to his political life right now, and we'll see within the coming weeks and months whether he remains as prime minister or whether he is replaced. If he is replaced, we'll find ourselves in a very different political situation. As I mentioned earlier, the overwhelming priority should be to dissuade Israel from, or the current Israeli government and the Israeli right from using this plan as a cover to take irreversible steps in the West Bank. I think the most effective way of doing that is not, as I said earlier, by confronting the plan head on, but by trying to work with the Trump administration and to persuade Trump that if he wants to achieve a great diplomatic success and a great deal, then he needs to move from his framework into some kind of a negotiation process, and one which has some hope of addressing Palestinian concerns. That, I think, is a more effective way to address this situation. And we should highlight those elements of the deal that do fit with the international consensus. It does propose a Palestinian state in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, with East Jerusalem as its capital and a massive economic investment, whilst trying to address Israeli security concerns. There's huge problems in the way that it does that. But the framework has elements that cohere with the international consensus, and they should be the basis for moving forward.
All right, Toby and Karina, we appreciate your time and for sharing your thoughts with us. And of course, we will, of course, have you back on to continue the discussion at a later time, but we'll leave it there for now with the both of you. I'll be back, viewers, though, after this break, continuing this discussion on this topic. Viewers are back here in Scope with me, Waqar Rizvi, and continue this discussion on that open letter that was written by 50 former foreign ministers and officials from across Europe. This letter released in The Guardian and I believe in other publications as well, possibly. To continue the discussion, we're now joined by Harry Fear, who is a journalist and filmmaker. He's joining us now from Oxford in the UK. And joining us from Jerusalem is Jeff Halper, who is the director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. Jeff and Harry, thank you for your time today. Harry, let me start with you. Is there value in having former officials releasing such a letter at this time? You always wonder, I imagine, at some level, that why didn't these very people speak up about this sort of thing when they were in office?
Indeed, I think one does have to wonder that. And having read the letter a few times over, it does seem to me that somehow they are perhaps in a face-saving exercise where they are saying the minimum amount required to save face to keep up the pretense of a European check on Israeli colonization of the West Bank, for instance. And this was, I mean, one letter in a newspaper, it's not exactly a serious effort. As you say, their power is now largely faded. I do think then that this falls in the context of the EU or these former European nation officials, again, as I say, doing the minimum necessary to save face while actually letting the Israelis continue on their course with their own desires.
I wonder if you agree with that, Jeff. I had a guest just a few moments ago earlier saying that the European Union, if it were to even threaten the Israelis in any way, that sort of threat wouldn't even be seen as credible, possibly on the part of the Israelis, because the EU has always seemingly given in to what the Israelis want.
Yeah, I mean, the irony is that the EU, Europe in general, is by far Israel's largest trading partner. So they do have a lot of leverage. But of course, Harry is right. The EU has never been, and the European countries individually have never been at all proactive in terms of stopping Israel's settlement drive, doing anything to lessen the occupation, anything to bring about a real peace. In other words, we have to understand that governments, all governments, are deal with conflict management, not conflict resolution. And there's no European country that I know of that's willing to expend the political capital of fighting Israel, fighting the United States, for example, and in a way fighting some of its own public opinion in terms of churches, maybe, in terms of the Jewish community and so on, that is necessary in order to really take a meaningful political stance. So they're all, like Harry says, saving face and basically managing the conflict, keeping the whole illusion going of two states and negotiations on both sides forever.
Yeah. So, Harry, you know, the Europeans like to point, have done this a number of times in the past as well, that everything needs to be done according to the international resolutions that currently exist, right? And within this letter as well, there's talk of that, the fact that, you know, that a lot of this goes beyond what the resolutions that the United Nations would allow for, and that we need to return to that. And it can be argued at some level that even Trump's plan, as flawed as it is, there may very well be some parts of it which can be picked out as possibly allowed for, even by UN resolutions. Do you think that the Europeans should see that as a green light to be able to discuss this with a future Israeli government, be it Netanyahu or Gantz, or even Trump?
That's a very good question again. I think that indeed there are some parts of the so-called peace plan which do have some starting points for credible discussion. But in a sense, I wonder whether or not those are actually red herrings, because in a sense, to go along with that would be to play the game. I think the real motive behind the release of the peace plan is to actually continue to extend, prolong, provide additional cover for this ongoing game, which is that on the one hand, we have this diplomatic dance where the European nations can sort of pretend to go along with somehow an ethical foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel and the Palestinians, while at the same time no one really talks about the dirty laundry, which is that the colonization is continuing and the two-state solution can't really exist anymore because it's just not a practical, workable idea on the ground. And I do wonder whether or not the peace plan is just a further throttle along that route in which Israel gets to colonize at a higher speed than previously, while somehow dragging the Europeans along, as you say, with these somehow legitimate points in his peace plan. And they can't really say to Trump, Netanyahu, they can't really say, well, this is completely off the radar. So they somehow have to object, but not entirely. So I do wonder whether or not this is actually a calibration for the next 10 to 15 years of really locking down the Palestinians' oppression for even longer.
That's interesting, Jeff. What are your thoughts on that? Because if we agree that, listen, the Europeans will not have the political will or the political courage to be able to go head on against the Israelis and Americans over this plan, then is this not then the next best option where at least the Europeans can pick out something from this plan and try to then bring the other two parties to some sort of a more reasonable, justifiable solution?
No, because it's over. There is no more conflict. There's nothing to negotiate anymore. It's done. It's over. There's one apartheid state that exists today, period. There's no more possible anything. And what has to happen now, in my view, is that the Palestinians have to be the ones that begin to be the proactive party. I mean, in all this discussion, why are we relying on the EU and on Trump and Jared Kushner and everybody else and Netanyahu? Where are the Palestinians in all of this? Abu Mazen went to the UN and said nothing. No counter plan, no nothing. And Abu Mazen and the Palestinian Authority, I have to say, are the ones that are preventing their own Palestinian people from coming up with the only option that exists, which is one democratic state between the river and the sea, taking the one apartheid state that Israel's created and turning it into a state of all its citizens. That's the only way out. And there is a Palestinian public opinion that supports that. The Palestinians have long supported the one-state idea. But Abu Mazen, the collaborator with Israel and with the international community, won't allow even those voices to come about. So in many ways, I blame Abu Mazen for this mess as much as I blame Trump or Netanyahu. You know, he's not a leader. He's really a collaborator with Israel. And he's preventing the Palestinians from adopting a political plan and mobilizing the international community in a way that could really, really change the situation in a dramatic way, like the ANC did in South Africa. So
but then to be fair, Jeff, if I come in for a moment, you know what hangs over the head of the likes of Abu Mazen or others, right? I mean, there is always that label of anti-Semitism, right? So if you then talk about, for example, just having that one democratic state, then you lose the Jewishness of the state of Israel as we would talk about it, right? As Israel would describe it. So isn't that then something which is very hard to overcome? I mean, I don't imagine that there are many politicians out there who have the political courage to be able to overcome that and fight that sort of label.
No, but the question is, why can't we hold Israel accountable? Why can't there be a Jewish state? Because Israel said no, basically. If you can't take the entire country from the Mediterranean Sea to the Jordan River with millions of Palestinians and rule over them permanently without giving them any kind of citizenship or civil rights and still want to be a Jewish country. It just doesn't work that way. You want to be a Jewish country, accept the two-state solution. You reject the two-state solution and it's long gone. All right, then you have to live, with what you created. Israel has to be. Why can't we hold Israel accountable for its own policies and actions? That I never understood.
Okay, I'll give you the final word very quickly, just under a minute if you can. What do you make of the argument then that the Israelis always use that Palestinians have always been the ones who have rejected any two-state solution put forward to them? And now if we're talking about a one-state solution, as I put to Jeff, then there's all these issues of, but we're a Jewish state and all of the above that come to play.
Yeah. I mean, just to tie all those things in together then, I mean, I think we have to ask the question, why is Mazen still alive? He is a partner for peace. Obviously, there are many Palestinians who believe that he is indeed a traitor or a collaborator, all these sorts of things. Abu Mazen is going along with playing the game, the charade that the Europeans are playing, but it's not working. And so I think the question is, why is Abu Mazen not been assassinated? It's because he is playing the game. He fulfills a very important role, which is that the facade can be continued while Israeli power consolidates.
Very well. We'll leave there as a final word, Harry, but we appreciate both yourself and Jeff for your time today, and of course for sharing your insight with us. Viewers, throughout these two segments about this topic with Karina and Toby as well, we discussed this plan, and at the beginning, the earlier discussion I had in this segment, we discussed how the Europeans would really be able to have any effect on this plan going forward, as much as they may disagree with it. Maybe they can pick out parts of it, as Toby had said, and take a calmer approach than the Americans and Israelis and say, listen, let's work on these parts, because at least these parts are within what is internationally accepted as possible resolutions and red lines, and otherwise within the construct of how the Israeli-Palestinian conflict should be addressed and resolved. But then, of course, at the end of the day, we also have realities on the ground, don't we, where Israel continues to build settlements, where Palestinians continue to lose land and lose any sovereignty that they may have once enjoyed at some point in time. What kind of a state really does this plan put forward, and how much teeth really does this open letter have by 50 former European officials? As I'd put to Harry as well, why don't these officials grow this conscience when they're in office, if they certainly do disagree with what the Israelis are doing on the ground? We haven't, of course, discussed the Israeli side of things, but the Israelis would obviously have their own arguments, saying that it's the Palestinians who have always rejected peace. That's an important issue to address as well, and we'll try to do that, of course, in later shows. I'll be back with my next segment after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, viewers. You're still here in Scope with me, Waqar Rizvi. In this segment of today's show, we're going to discuss a lawsuit that has been filed in the United States on behalf of Palestinians, as well as those who are U.S. citizens as well, against Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, Ambassador Friedman, that is, of the United States, who is the ambassador to Israel, and Jared Kushner, as well as, Donald Trump's son-in-law, and the one who has been part of forming this quote-unquote Middle East peace plan and otherwise, and others for their involvement in the quote-unquote ethnic cleansing as well as genocide of Palestinians. This lawsuit, of course, goes into great detail about the many grievances, of course, the Palestinians have towards the occupier, i.e. Israel, as well as the Americans, really, because it's the Americans who have aided and abetted Israel to be able to reach this point. At least that's from the Palestinian perspective. They've spoken about the installation of an apartheid regime in the occupied Palestinian territories, amongst, of course, their other grievances as well. Let's discuss all of that a bit further. We're now joined by Michel, who is a historian. He is also coordinator of the Interdisciplinary Center for Jewish and Arab Studies of the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. He's joining us now from Brazil. Joining us from Amman, Jordan, is Daoud, who is a journalist and columnist. And joining us from Gaza is Akram al-Sattari, who is an international relations expert, news reporter, and interpreter. Akram, Daoud, and Michel, thank you to all three of you for your time today. Michel, let me start with you. How important do you think such a lawsuit is at this point in time? And it hasn't gotten a huge amount of coverage, certainly at this time, but is it important, do you think, for the Palestinians to be able to have their voice out there in the courts within the U.S. as well?
I think we're not talking about the deal. We're talking about a kind of an attempt of the United States to bring a new way of talking to Israeli and Palestinian people. I don't think we can understand it as a fair deal, or even as a deal, or as an economical deal. Not only an economical deal, but a very specific economic deal where the Palestinians are less important than every other part in the process. So I cannot see a real important way of understanding this process as a legitimate process or a peace process of something like this. And I think the Palestinians should have their national and legitimate voice heard in the process, and they didn't have it. So I don't think it's important and a legitimate process for the Palestinian people.
Because, Daoud, you understand as well as anybody else who works within the sphere how hard it is to get the Palestinian voice and the Palestinian angle to the Americans, right? And I'm not just talking about, of course, the government and the establishment. I'm talking about also to the American people. Do you think that such lawsuits will hopefully help in that regard?
The larger picture is that in the post-World War II era, the whole world agreed that nobody should have a right to take land by force or through war. Even in the 1967 UN Resolution 242, it says it is inadmissible to take land by war. It has to be done through agreement. And what we've seen in this surrender document that is being forced on Palestinians is a kind of Orientalism that we've seen in the 50s and 40s and before that, where countries, powerful countries, basically take over land by force. And therefore, I think the one way to kind of sell this idea is that this is not a Palestinian-Israeli problem. But if you legitimize taking land by force, by war, then you allow all kinds of groups in Africa, in Asia, India, wherever, if they have enough force, they can take over land and say this is our land because we are the most, and then you can go back how many years to say this used to be our land. And the Jews are saying 3,000 years ago, God gave this to us. So once you allow that, once you legitimize this, it becomes a world problem. And it's not just the Palestinian Israelis. Once you make this a legitimate argument, then every group or every country in the world that has a problem with its neighbor will use this to say, look, you allowed the Israelis to take over Palestinian land. Why can't we in Africa or in Asia or Latin America or Australia or any other country have the right to do that?
All right, so Akram, what are your thoughts? Because it's important to have people understand, right, the Palestinian point of view on all this, because it seems that there are a lot of people, or at least within the U.S. or even other places around the world, who don't really know enough of the Palestinian side of things and the fact that the Palestinian land has been taken over. I mean, there's quite a large amount of such people out there. Is it important then to go through the court system, even within America, to say, listen, this needs to be discussed?
Well, I find this step as a creative step, given the action that has been taking place in the United States, in Europe, and elsewhere, for the sake of further exposing the occupation, and for an attempt to bring to trial and to justice all those officials who have been engaging in what people see as a consolidation of the occupation in the Palestinian territory. We have seen different incidents and instances where people in Europe were filing lawsuits against Israeli officers, Israeli officials, accusing them of committing war crimes and genocide. But now the different thing is that we see that happening in the United States. In the very short run, that will help shed the light in the United States about the Palestinian cause and help also mobilize and galvanize some more people into action to further expose and boycott the occupation. But in the medium and long run, I think this is a nominal step where we don't expect a lot of action or a lot of sentences or a lot of decisions to be made on that. But it helps in mobilizing the people, it helps in exposing the occupation, and it helps also into exhausting the occupation, trying to deploy their officials and diplomats in every single arena, be it United States or Europe, for the sake of defending the indefendable occupation that has been continuous for such a very long time.
Michel, Gherman, in Brazil, one of the things that's mentioned in this lawsuit as well is AIPAC and the Israel lobby, right? So AIPAC would argue that, listen, the lobbying work it does is legal within the construct of American democracy. But it also, in this lawsuit, says that AIPAC suppresses any criticism of Israel and immediately labels as anti-Semitism or otherwise. How important is it to highlight that as well?
Yeah, we have the AIPAC and we have other Israeli lobbies. I don't know if I could call it Israeli lobbies, but some groups in the United States that could help a lot, like J Street, for example. I think that AIPAC has a very big part of this group dominated by the right-wing groups and also by new Pentecostal and new religious Christian groups that defend everything that Israel does and understand any criticisms about Israel as anti-Semitism. It's bad for Israel. It's bad for Israel and it's bad for the Zionism. Israel should be a normal country where criticism against Israel should be a normal and a regular thing, just as for the Palestinian people. I can't criticize Palestinian people, Palestinian leaders, without being called anti-Islamic or anti-Palestinian men. So it's a problem for Israel to understand every criticism against Israel as anti-Semitism, and we should change it. And in the United States, the people are changing it. We have a civil society group, just as J Street and others, that can do that. And they came from not only the Jewish side of the American society, but also from the Zionist side of this American society. So we just cannot see Trump and the Trump plan as representative of the Israeli interest in the United States. They are more than this or less than this. They're connected also to other right-wing groups in the United States, some of them not connected to the Judaism, but connected to the Christian right-wing groups in the United States of America.
Yeah. Daoud, what do you think of the role that AIPAC plays in all this, right? Because it does seem that it just stifles any talk, right? It's just a chokehold on any talk, really, about criticism of Israel, however legitimate it may be.
Yeah, I think there's one mistaken information. AIPAC is playing a double role. It claims to be a domestic organization, but in fact, it's a lobbying group for a foreign country. Now, it is not registered as an international foreign group. It's registered as an American group. And that's what makes it so dangerous, because they pretend to be doing something for the interest of Americans, but in fact, they're doing it for the interest of a foreign country. And I think the fact that the line between domestic interest, of the interest of the United States as a country, and the interest of a small foreign country like Israel is blurred in this issue. And I think AIPAC has blurred the difference between, and so you have the Israeli flag and the American flag, you have the Jewish Hatikva alongside the American Star-Spangled Banner. So I think there is a problem of dual loyalty, and I know this is an issue that everybody starts saying anti-Semitic and so on, but it is a problem that many in America are saying. We should have the interest of America, and AIPAC is not, even though it's recorded, registered as an American domestic organization, it's really a representative of a foreign country and should be registered as that.
Akram, what are your thoughts on that? Because somebody would argue within the U.S. itself that it is in America's interest to support Israel. What are your thoughts of that?
Well, I think that some Americans, and I'm quoting now Bernie Sanders, have made it very clear. Bernie Sanders is a Jew, and he said, I am a proud Jew, but I don't think that denying the rights of Palestinians to live in dignity and protection would help in achieving peace. So I'm quoting one American man who is running for office and who knows very right and very well, and who's a Jew, and he thinks and believes that taking action in support of the Palestinians and giving them the statehood is an integral step towards the stability in the whole region and is in the interest of the United States. But the problem with the AIPAC and the problem with the American administration, that has some manifestations at the judiciary level as well, is that they never tolerate any criticism when it comes to Palestine. They would never want to accept the fact that Palestinians have been living without a state for 72 years now. They are not willing to accept that occupation is illegitimate, and they will keep fighting from that perspective, and they'll keep trying to silence and mute anyone who says some other words than the words that they believe are right. And that is taking to the entire region in Palestine and in Arab countries eventually to a war, which is very true and which has been predicted by many, many American, Arab, and Jewish writers and analysts who believe that the American administration is taking the entire region to a war. They made a war in Yemen, they are fueling the war in Libya, and they are causing conflicts and disputes all over the region. Yeah. And Palestine is not going to be an exception, is going to fight also because of their policies, not of anything else.
Michel, one of the parts of this lawsuit also talks about the need for the plan, as well as the entire American actions towards the Palestinian peoples, that all of that needs to be referred to the United Nations General Assembly. Now, I wonder what your thoughts are about the track record of the UN and its member states in being able to really help resolve in any way the Israel-Palestine issue.
I wanted to go back to the other point.
Sure.
It's very important to understand that it's not possible to call every critic against Israel as anti-Semitism. But the anti-Semitism exists, and we have to fight against it. And to call everything that's connected to Israel as a double loyalty is anti-Semitism. We have to be concerned about that, because the anti-Semitism helps the American right-wing movements in America and in Israel. And there is the AIPAC and there is the J Street, as I said before. And we have to respect that the United States accept as a state these kind of organizations, and it's not because they exist there that they are connected to other states or something like this. They have the right to exist, and we have to fight the organizations we don't agree with them, but not because they are Jewish or Zionist, because we don't agree with them. About your question, I think that one of the most important points we have in the plan of Trump is the fact that the UN and any other international organizations were not part of the process. And this is a kind of a break with international law and multi-international connected states that should be on the table, and they were not. It is part of Trump and of Trump politics to break with these international organizations. That's a very dangerous step they did, I think.
Okay, Daoud, I'll give you the final. I'll let you just go ahead and expand on when you spoke about dual loyalty, because I know this is very sensitive territory, so I don't want there to be any confusion in any viewers' minds about what you've said. So just go ahead. We have about a minute left.
Well, I do understand that for Jews that have suffered from the Holocaust, the accusation of dual loyalty is a very sensitive issue, and I don't claim that I'm talking about Jews here. I'm talking about the interest of Americans. I think Americans, regardless of their background, Christian Zionists, Jewish Zionists, secular Zionists, who give interest to a foreign country, are playing a dangerous game. And I think the UN and other agencies have made it clear that there has to be a reference point. Back to your old question, there has to be some point where both sides agree to. What is our reference? We cannot accept the Trump, Kushner, Netanyahu plan as a reference point for solving a conflict. We accept the UN or some international body as a reference point, because otherwise it's not might is right, it becomes right is might. So those who have power are the ones who decide things, and that's not what we want for all the countries, including Pakistan, including other countries.
Indeed. We'll leave there as a final, but we appreciate all three of our guests for their time today. That was Daoud speaking to us from Amman, Akram was speaking to us from Gaza, and Michel there was speaking to us from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Viewers, we've spoken about, of course, this lawsuit that has been filed in a U.S. court against Donald Trump and Netanyahu, as well as Kushner and Friedman, Ambassador Friedman, that is the U.S. ambassador to Israel, who's been a very big part, of course, of this Middle East plan and, of course, of the Trump policies towards Israel. And what this means exactly for exposure policy on the Palestinian point of view in all of this. Because if we're going to have the U.S. claim that it is a neutral mediator in all of this, isn't it important for the American people also to hear from Palestinians themselves about their grievances, be it through the court system or otherwise? As Akram there said in his answer, this is a creative way to go about getting exposure for the Palestinian point of view, because they're desperate to have their point of view expressed within the U.S. in a free fashion without just having labels of anti-Semitism put up immediately, without even hearing what they're saying. And then, of course, there's a role of the lobbying groups, such as AIPAC. But then, as Michel there said, there are other lobby groups and other important civil groups as well, such as J Street and Jewish Voice for Peace and others who do some good work on this regard as well. But then AIPAC, its work in some ways seems like it wants to stifle free speech when it comes to the issue of Israel altogether, not wanting there to be any criticism of Israel at all. In Americans' minds as well. That's certainly not something that is in America's national interest, is it? For a group, as Daoud has said to, has registered as a domestic lobbying group, not a lobbying group for a foreign government. We'll keep a close eye on that, of course, here in Scope. I'll leave it there for now, though. I've been Waqar Rizvi. Thanks for watching.